I hope you all enjoyed getting curious about your own mind map and will continue to do so. It takes time to get to know ourselves and it takes time to get to know others. So I hope you're taking time to get curious about the mind map of others as well. Three things are super important as we heal our wounds. In any wound that we're healing is one, to become aware of them, to create an awareness around our wounds, that we have them, that they're there. Two is to accept them, to be able to accept that we have these wounds, to be able to accept that we've been wounded and that they have an effect on us. And then once those two pieces are there, we're aware of them and we accepted them, then we can take action, then we can do something about it. We can heal it. We can do something to make it better, to improve our life. And today this is in a little, I want to talk about an awareness piece around emotions. For myself, um, there was a time where I think I completely shut off my emotions. Now, they still happened. They still happen because emotions are part of us. They happen in our body. They are part of who we are. We don't control our emotions per se, but they happen. And we can't really get away from them, but we can stuff them down. We can try to bury them. We can try to not pay attention to them. We can neglect them and not even be aware of what they are and what their function is. And that's what I want to talk about today is the function of emotions and why emotions are important and how we can stop neglecting them, even if in childhood we learned to neglect them. So ideally, when we're born into a family, we would be born and our parents would have an emotional connection to us. They would feel an emotional connection and they would be coming, now this is ideal, they would be coming from a very healed, healthy place themselves. So they would be able to look at us as separate, unique individual from them. They wouldn't be looking at us as an extension of them or as a burden to them or as um, a kind of an obligation. It would be this incredible experience of I brought this child into the world. They're unique and individual, and I have an emotional connection to them, and I'm going to help them grow and develop and mature. That would be ideally what would happen when we talk about our emotions. They would pay attention to our likes and our dislikes. They would be attuned to when we're feeling good and when we're not. They'd notice because they would be aware of them themselves. They would understand their own emotions. So when they saw those emotions ignite in us, they would be able to help us through those, help us make sense of them, help us understand the function of them. And we would be able to honor those emotions for what they are. They would be a message. We'd receive the message they had for us, and we'd be able to learn and grow from the message of these emotions. And they would help us develop and grow. That doesn't always happen and probably rarely happens ideally because this life isn't about the ideal. We're progressing, we're growing. So, like anything else we talk about, keep in mind it's so important not to shame or blame yourself for having not known something or done something or learned something. And it's important not to shame and blame someone else. We can't, if we can only be where we are. So if our parents didn't have the knowledge of their emotions, then they probably neglected our emotions because they're probably neglecting their own emotions. Now, there are lots of different scenarios and lots of different things, but I'm a believer that most often the neglect or the wounds that we have come from unintentional reasons. Don't get me wrong. Some of those wounds happen intentionally by people who are making really bad choices. We will talk about those in the future. But for now, I want to keep it at this level of most things happen unintentionally. I love my parents. I think they did the best that they could, the best with the knowledge and the understanding that they had, and I'm grateful for everything that they gave me. So, what are some of the things that can cause emotional neglect? Well, in one of my previous videos, I talked about growing up in the 70s, and maybe it was just my home. I don't think so, because I don't think I got asked a lot in school how I felt, or, you know, and I was going through a lot of stuff. So I'm sure I wore a lot of emotions on my face. And when emotions aren't noticed, when they're buried and neglectful, they can cause a lot of mental health problems, a lot of physical health problems, relational problems. Um, they can wreak havoc in our life. And so we need to be aware of them. We need to understand their function. And if we didn't get it, let's figure it out now. If, like, even as a parent, so I only understood emotions as far as I was taught and understood them through my childhood, through my schooling, through whatever I went through. I could only be as good about emotions as where I was. And I guarantee you, I did not know as much as I know today. My children are grown, meaning they're out of my house, and I have repair to do, because I am sure that I neglected their emotions at times, not intentionally. I wanted the best for my kids. I wanted to give them everything I had. And I gave them everything I had and everything I knew how to do most often. But I'm imperfect like everyone else. So repair has to happen when we didn't do it the first time around. And that's okay. That's okay. Um, so this isn't about shaming and blaming. This is about healing. This is about learning and continuing to progress wherever we are today. So emotions, they happen. They are part of us, just like we hunger and thirst for things, just like I have a nose on my face and eyeballs and ears. We have emotions. They're just part of our makeup. They're just part of who we are. And they happen and they have a function. And sometimes those things get all messed up and distorted and we're not aware of them. But for today, this will be a shorter video. Let's just be aware of what emotions are and their functions. And I'll leave you with a book that you can read if you're more interested in emotions and learning about emotional neglect in childhood. Um, Emotions. I've been reading this book from Dr. Jonas. Now, I don't know. Gosh darn it, I'm terrible with names, and names are important. It might be Jonice Webb. Anyway, she has a PhD, so Dr. Jonice Webb is what I'm going to go with. I could be wrong, and I maybe botched that. She wrote a book called Running on Empty. And when I first read this book, and I read it again and again because it really has a lot of good things that I've learned about emotions. But she talks in a chapter about what emotions are and their functions. Not she has a short list, but this is just an awareness piece. So be aware that you have emotions. They happen in the body. They just we're emotional beings. Emotions happen. So I just want to read through this list that's in her book, and then I'll leave you with the reference of the book. But emotions. So fear. We all feel fear. What do you think the function of fear is? It has a function. The function is to self-preserve, to escape. So if we're being chased by a bear, or we are in a relationship that isn't healthy, or I don't know, there's a number of things that could cause us to feel fear. That has its purpose, and the function of fear is to help us escape and to self-preserve, keep us alive. Fear. Anger. Anger's function. Now, sometimes we look at emotions, sometimes they get categorized as good or bad. They're not good or bad, they just have a function. Now, if they get attached to something, an inappropriate attachment to something, then maybe they function in a negative way in our life. But anger's function is to push us to fight back, to self protect. And we need that. There are times we need to fight back and we need to self protect. Anger, that's the emotion, that's its function, is to help us do that. Love drives us to care for our spouse, our children, and others. Um, and hopefully, it drives us to care for ourselves too. Love. If we have love for ourselves, then we will be driven to care for ourselves. Passion. What is the function of passion? To drive us to procreate, to create, and to invent. I have a passion for helping share my knowledge and what I've learned, and to share what's helped me to heal from my wounds. And I have a passion to share that. So I create these videos, and I'll continue to create awareness and change in people's lives. That's my hope for the passion I have. Hurt pushes us to correct a situation. So if something I do hurts someone else or hurts myself, or both parties are hurt because of an action, it can push us to make a correction. Hopefully these wounds that we have, the hurt that comes from those, will push us to correct it, because healing from our wounds gives us so much freedom and energy to use in places that will serve us better. Sadness. Sadness tells us we're losing something important. So when a friend moves away, when we lose a loved one, they pass away, that causes sadness, grief, an emotion along the lines of sadness. Grief, I think, it's not listed here, but I think grief has a function not only that we're losing something, but that we need to mourn that loss. We need to give ourselves time and space to mourn, to let go, to honor and respect what we had and what will change. A couple more listed here. Compassion pushes to help others. Disgust tells us to avoid something. Curiosity, one of my favorite words, drives us to explore and learn. That's the end of the list in this book. But get curious about your emotions, and be aware that you have them and they have a specific function. And that function drives us to take certain action. And just this week, be mindful of your emotions. Take time to find out how you feel about things. I guess feelings are our way of explaining our emotions to others. So when we say, I feel sad, or I feel anxious, or I feel lonely, our feelings are a way of expressing the emotions that are going on inside of us. And our feelings matter. And if we neglect them and we try to bury them, they will come back to haunt us. I spent a good number of years, from the time I was 3 until probably in my 30s, maybe even early 40s, dealing with a lot of physical illnesses that were unexplained by doctors. I got a lot of idiopathic diagnoses. I got a lot of, well, it's similar to this, but I don't know that I can diagnose that, but we'll try to treat it with this. And wouldn't you know, that the more that I have done my emotional healing from my emotional wounds, those pains physically have gone away. Our body, mind, and spirit are so interconnected, and they affect each other. Each part, our spirit affects our body and our mind affects our spirit and our body affects our mind and our spirit. They're all interconnected, interwoven. And so the pain that my body was going through was stemmed from what I call emotional constipation. Just like when we eat food, our body takes in the nutrients, takes in the good, takes in what will help us grow, and eliminates the waste. We need to do the same thing with our emotions. We need to take the message it has, let it function the way it needs to, take its message, take the nourishment from those emotions, process through the emotions, and then eliminate the waste from them. Because when we try to bury them, when we try to ignore them, when we pretend they don't matter, they don't go away. They just get stuck in the cells of our body where they can wreak havoc. Just like if you got really constipated, if you didn't poop after you ate your food, that waste, it's going to work against your body. It's going to hurt your body because your body is meant to eliminate that waste. Same thing with emotions. We are meant to have emotions. They are a part of us and have a function, and they're necessary. Don't bury them. And if you've buried them, let's start uncovering them. Let's acknowledge our feelings, acknowledge that emotions are a part of who we are and that they have a function, and we need to pay attention to how we feel. So for today, for this week, just be aware of how you feel. Pay attention. They'll create sensations in the body. When I feel scared, my throat tightens, my stomach tightens, and I'll feel super constricted in here. And I know when I feel those sensations that I'm feeling fear. So there's sensations, and then I need to protect. So let's start with that. Let's start with just being aware of our emotions, that we have them, that they have a purpose and a function, and pay attention to them. And we'll talk more about what we do with those emotions we've buried and how they present and how they show up when they're trying to crawl their way out and release themselves. We'll talk about that too. But for today, this week, just be aware that you have emotions and they're good. All of them have a function. They're given to us for a purpose. They're a part of who we are. And we need them. They're important. They matter. Your feelings matter. And that's all for now. Have a good week.